So, good evening and welcome everyone to this 10th day of Words of Wisdom series. And today's topic is developing and deploying serverless application with React and AWS Amplify. And today's speaker is MISHRA. And little intro about him. He is an MLH fellow and he is also an ambassador at Microsoft Student Run. So today's session will be continued by him. So over to you.
Good evening. Am I audible? Okay, I guess I am. So let me start sharing my screen. Yes, so first of all, I will be sharing my Chrome tab. And once I'm done with this, I will start sharing my code editor. Okay. So we need to be on the slide 1. Okay. So good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this session on developing and deploying serverless applications using React and AWS Amplify. And in this session, we will be basically discussing a lot about React, Amazon Web Services, and how you as a beginner can get started with developing and deploying serverless applications using Amplify. We will also discuss React and AWS right from the scratch and how we can totally get started with developing some cool applications using both of them. But after understanding some of the basic concepts that revolve around two of the most trending technologies, I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to the team at Code Warriors for inviting me for this session. And I'm elated to be delivering this talk right now. So for people who don't know what React is, then React is just a JavaScript library that can be used for developing and deploying front-end web application. So I have been a React developer for the past few months, and the flexibility that it offers for user interface development is simply unparalleled. Right now, React is actively maintained and developed by the team at Facebook, and it is extensible while maintaining a very simple core that makes use of reusable components. In this session, we will discuss React and what is serverless, including how to develop server applications right from the scratch. So if you have got any doubts or questions, just put them in the chat section, and I ensure that I will be going through all of them at a specific time and help you clear up your doubts. With this determination, let's get started up. Okay, I guess there seems to be a problem. Yes, so let me start off with a general introduction to myself. My name is Harsh and I'm an MLH fellow for the fall 2020 batch, and I'm a developer outreach at DeepSource. Previously, I have been a software engineering intern at QXF2 and a technical content reviewer at Geeks for Geeks. So over the past few months, I have been a participant as well as a project administrator for various open source programs like Student Code in, P Club Summer of Code, Hacking Codes, and semester-long projects. Beside these, I am a third-year student at Satyabhama Institute of Science and Technology, Chennai, and I love to work with web development, data modeling, and algorithms. I'm also a technical and open source mentor at OpenMind and at Codeway. So you can catch me up on LinkedIn or on GitHub at the rate Harsh Casper, and we can have a nice discussion about anything in general about development. Okay, my slides are not loading today. I guess I don't know the reason. Let me restart it. Okay, so let's check out the agenda for this session today. So in today's session, we will be basically learning the basics of React and how you can get started with serverless development using AWS. You will also get a head start on why React is such a great choice for developing web application and how you can go serverless using AWS Amplify. Lastly, we are going to build a very simple project right from the scratch using React and AWS Amplify for the purpose. And we will also host it using some CI/CD pipelines for better durability. If you're having any doubts, just put it on the chat section, and either me or one of the hosts will help you out in the process. So let's get started up. First things first, what is React? So this recent term has caught the attention of many front-end developers all across the world, and especially among the JavaScript ecosystem. So ever since it was launched by by Facebook a few years back, it was touted as an efficient and flexible JavaScript library that can be used for developing front-end application. And after that, React has got a huge traction among developers so that they can build some intuitive and functional user interface with minimal code compared to some other JavaScript frameworks like Angular or Vue, or compared to the vanilla JavaScript. And this has been made possible only with the huge ecosystem that the React commands and with a high range of developer tools. But before we discuss about React in a great length, let's actually discuss about what a front-end library actually is. Okay, I guess my slides are not loading, so I will just prefer to not go the full screen. Yeah. So a front end is just a presentation layer of your application. So you can just describe it as all this stuff that the user needs to see, but more generally, it is any code that is responsible for efficiently displaying any sort of a data to the user. So let's say you have a server up and running, and it needs to show the user some sort of a data. It can be about the recent statistics about COVID-19. Without having a front-end interface, you cannot expect the user to know about all this information. And this is where the need for a front end, or basically a client-side interface, comes in. On the other hand, a front-end framework or a library is just a scaffolding or a space in which you can structure your file. Like you can have some components, you can have some CSS processors, you can have some Ajax request, some component styling and all that. So if you're using front-end framework or library like React or Angular or Vue, you can basically simplify your task, but there is more to this than actually meets the eye. So developing web application using vanilla JS or using just simplistic HTML and CSS would require you to make extensive use of DOM, and that basically stands for the document object model. And you need to get some sort of a JSON data, and you need to append it to the HTML elements. So this approach works while you're prototyping your application, but once you start developing your application on a very large scale, the JavaScript and the CSS files will simply start fattening up, and this will slowly bring down the performance. And if you're just making some sort of a simple change or you're fixing any bug, you would need to do some sort of an extensive development, and storing your data in the DOM and making sense of the code would be too much of an issue. Here comes in a front-end framework or a library. Basically, they will allow you to break down your code into multiple components and then simply make them reusable, which can help us to maintain our user interface. You can structure your data flow in the application with them and make use of some preprocessor or transpilers. It will also help you to follow a design architecture that would help you while you're scaling up the application. So why React for web development? So according to a report by Tekla, React has been the leading framework. Sorry, it's not a framework, it's a library. And it's the leading JavaScript-based library or a framework based upon the usage and popularity compared to some other niche JavaScript frameworks like Angular or Vue. So React as a JavaScript library that has been developed by Facebook, it simply allows you to create an attractive user interface. And right now, it is one of the most influential and popular JavaScript libraries since it first appeared on the scene. So with React, you can create single page application at which you doesn't require any sort of page reload, or you don't need to wait for any sort of an extra time. It is just one web page that allows you to visit, which then loads different component. So with React, you can define components as class or a function, and these components will further provide you multiple features Like they can provide you some sort of feature, like they can allow you to scale your code, they can allow you code reusability, and it will keep your code much more organized. So there are tons of other advantages of React that we would be possibly covering in the later part of the session. So since you guys already know what React is, based upon my introduction and based upon your further intuition, then you should know about the traditional problem that the React is trying to solve. So the traditional problem that React tries to solve is to actually efficiently update the DOM. So one way to update the DOM is by manually putting in values in the respective DOM nodes, which is obviously slow and not scalable. So if you compare this approach to some of the approaches followed by some other JavaScript frameworks like Angular, so Angular tries to solve the problem by making use of data binding. So it binds the data, it's bind the variables used in the view with the respective counterparts in the model, and then it automatically updates all the instances of a variable in a view when its respective value in a model changes. On the other hand, React provides a different approach to solving this particular problem. It uses a technique called reconciliation to evaluate the difference in the DOM representation at 2 points in the time, and it only updates the part that has been changed. And this simply makes React real efficient in speed and execution. React also makes use of JSX for coding the application, and you can simply identify JSX as a JavaScript extension that will allow you to combine both HTML and JavaScript in an XML-like syntax. So JSX is transpiled to JavaScript statements by making use of Babel, and Babel is just a tool chain that is mainly used to convert the ES6 code that is currently the modern standard of JavaScript without needing something else. So many of the browsers still don't support ES6. So using Babel, we can actually convert the ES6 code into a backward compatible version of JavaScript so that it can be used even in the most modern browsers and even in some of the older browsers like Internet Explorer. So before you start working on React, you need to remember that it's not a framework. It is a library. And just like a library, React has got some cool features. It has got an active community. It has even got its own JavaScript syntax. But on the other hand, a framework like Angular or Vue, it provides you something more than just a library. Like if I just take the example of Angular, you will be given the access to a view rendering. You will given the access to hypertext transfer protocol interaction, some sort of animations, form validations, and all that. So React gives you only one thing, and that is a view. So basically with React, you can only build the view of the user interface that you are trying to develop and deploy. So React is small and powerful, and it has got many features that are simply great. Some of them are like declarative programming, virtual DOM, and all of them. So I will not go into much details because the purpose of this session is something else. But this is the basic intuition that you need to understand about React in general. Okay, so Naga has a question that how is React different from React Native? So basically, React as a JavaScript library allows you to develop applications for the web. But on the other hand, React Native allows you to develop applications for the mobile. And React Native is a hybrid platform. So basically using a single code base, you can have applications for both Android and iOS. So you don't need to have your application coded in multiple different languages for different purposes. So the difference is as simple as that. React is for web, React Native is for mobile. And both of them makes use of JavaScript, basically the JSX syntax for developing the components. I hope that answers the question. So there are plenty of advantages with React. So the first advantage is that you can reuse the assets. So basically you can have multiple components and you can reuse the components in your application without having to code them right from the scratch. So let's say as a web developer, you're trying to have some sort of a navigation bar on your application. And let's say you're using just HTML, CSS, and some basic JavaScript. So in each and every HTML page, you need to hard code that navigation bar on the top of your HTML file. But on the other hand, on React, you can just define a component, you can just export that component, and you can import them in some other file. And that component can be just rendered on time. So all of this makes React entirely reusable, and you don't have to configure a lot of things almost every time. React.js also provides a virtual DOM, which enables the declarative API of React. And it basically tells the React what state you want the user interface to be in, so that the DOM can exactly match the state according to that. React also allows for direct work with components, and it uses some sort of a downward data binding to ensure that the changes in the child structure don't affect the parents. And lastly, we have got a wide range of React developer tools. Uh, like some of them can exactly make the developer life a lot easier. Like I personally use React developer tools for Chrome, which basically allows me to find some issues and debug my errors on my React application. So you can leverage all of them, and you can have a front-end application up and ready in a fraction of a time. So I hope you have understood about React up till this point, and I hope there are no questions up till now. Yes, so let us start the discussion about serverless. So before we talk about serverless, let us first start with the elephant in the room. You might be thinking that serverless, and by the name signifies, it simply means that we don't have any servers. And that is completely wrong. Serverless doesn't mean no servers. It simply means that the underlying servers are being hidden from the developer. So if you're using some sort of an API, let me take the example of the GitHub API that will allow you to fetch information of a particular project, of a particular user, or something else. So if you're using the GitHub API, the underlying infrastructure is completely hidden from you, and you don't have to worry about it. So it is a rather confusing term, but don't let it fool you. You still have to manage some kind of an infrastructure, and that will be some kind of a server. So in layman terms, serverless architecture or serverless computing, it just means that your backend logic will not run on some sort of a third-party server infrastructure, which you don't need to worry about. So it does not mean that there is no server, but it simply means that you don't have to maintain it. So you just have a server somewhere up and ready. It is running your application, but you don't have to maintain it, and you don't even have to care about it. This is the entire meaning of serverless. So let us now get started with our discussion about serverless. Before we jump into how to build serverless applications using React and Amplify. So I guess majority of you understand how the web works. So every web page is transmitted to your browser as an hypertext markup language, and the application responsible for sending this markup document to browsers is called a web server. So confusingly, this application resides on something that is called as a web server. So you can regard web server as something like a remote computer. But how does this web application exactly know what to send to the browser? So it sends whatever the browser requests, because the browser downloads the website from the web server using the hypertext transfer protocol. So as you might have guessed, every page on the internet is stored somewhere on a remote server, basically a remote computer. And to put the things into perspective, you can just spin up a server on your laptop that can serve an entire website to the web. And when you type something like www.instagram.com on your browser, basically that request goes to the Instagram's remote server. So you can have a remote server up and running on your own local machine, and you can serve your application to the entire world. So if you would like to set up your website for global use, you need to have a server up and running that can process the request and render the application. Am I right? So this was a traditional approach that we followed few years back. Server computing was the de facto way of application development and deployment, and we needed dedicated engineers who can maintain the servers and who can maintain the backend code. With the introduction of serverless architecture, that requirement has been rooted out completely. So from setting up a load balancer to ensuring that your application can perform as good as at scale. You can have some sort of a CI/CD process up and running, and basically all of this can be managed by the serverless. So let me just try. I guess my presentation is not working properly. Let me just reload it back again. Till then, if anyone has got any questions, they can put it up on the live chat, and I will just address them right now. Okay, I guess it is visible now. Yes. So basically, using serverless, you can have a state where all of this, all of the management that you do for setting up your infrastructure, your code can be entirely managed, and it can be just abstracted away and hidden behind the APIs that you can simply manage by your code logic. So you can simply think of a REST API. So in a REST API, we need a database, we need a runtime to run our code, and we need a hypertext transfer protocol, proxy, or a router. Each of them have their own complexity and the things that we have to take care of. So like if I just take an example, then the database needs indexing, they need their own backup operations. Your runtime needs a scaling protocol, and the proxy needs an authentication mechanism. By putting all of these above behind an API and let them handle their own issues, we are just left with only one thing, and that is our code. So it is a more simplified communication process if we are just having APIs up and running everywhere and communicating to each other on serverless compute, through which we can pass information and we can start developing our core logic of the application. And this is how the serverless application was born. Serverless doesn't mean that there aren't any servers. It doesn't mean that there are less servers. It just means that you don't have to manage them since they are abstracted away by the platform. So from a developer and an operations perspective, there are no servers. So this exactly makes the scalability easy because you no longer need server for the purpose. Serverless computing allows you as a business owner or as a developer to pay for servers only when a user request or an event is triggered. So basically you can eliminate the idle time. You can make sure that you're not paying a lot. And with serverless, you can hire less people for your team and you can just focus on the core logic of your application. And this is how the serverless is changing the world right now. Okay, so there are various advantages of serverless architecture. So as I mentioned before, serverless architecture is a powerful way of business owners to control the infrastructure expenses. So if your website has less than 1,000 visitors, switching to a pay-as-you-go model will simply cut down a lot of maintenance costs that is going into your resource. On-server apps have some sort of a scalability limitation, and if your users are increasing in number, you need to rebuild and you need to renovate the tech backbone of your application. But if you're using some sort of a serverless, you will be able to access next to infinite scaling power, and this is something that every developer wants to have right now. So serverless architecture will simply make your project development much easier because the elements you create are simply reusable. You can reuse them at a later time and you can scale your application. And the thing is, most serverless functions are available through a hypertext transfer protocol request, and they are not reliant on source code to run. So having layers across the serverless function promotes reusability as well by creating some sort of an efficient code. So with a serverless platform, a programmer can write the code. They can directly run it on the cloud without worrying about the hardware, operating systems, or servers. They can write the business logic as code and then run the code without needing to be aware about the deployment complexities. Applications get high availability and auto scalability without additional effort from the developer. And this can specifically reduce the development time and the consequent costs. And all of these makes serverless a lucrative choice to get started with the development. Let us get down to understanding Amplify now. So up till this point, if anyone has got any doubts, the chat window is open for you. I'm going to address them for the next 2 minutes before we are gonna jump onto understanding Amplify. So if anyone has got any doubts, they can put it on the chat section and I will go through them right now. Okay, so Naga has a question on what are the best resources to learn React. So there is not a best resource. There is a resource that can actually help you in understanding the basic concepts. So try to find out some specific resource that are exactly beginner friendly and then try to jump on them. So from my experience, if you already know web development, then pick on some basic resources like the documentation or some videos by Traversy Media on YouTube and try to convert your existing web projects onto the React code. And if you want to just get started with React right from the scratch, I'm just pre-assuming that you don't have much web development experience, then you can simply go to the front-end masters because over there are multiple courses around React and there are JavaScript experts that will basically guide you in the entire process. So make sure to hit up that resource, front-end masters. You can easily access all of their courses from GitHub Student Developer Pack for 6 months, and you can just start developing your projects out of them because the project-based learning is the best way of learning. If you have any more questions, the chat window is open. I guess we don't have any more questions, so let's get started up with Amplify because this is where the things get interesting. So let us get down to understanding Amplify now. So if you have worked with Firebase before, and I expect that at least you have heard the name Firebase. So Amplify is just the AWS version of Firebase, but in comparison, Amplify has got better features and better accessibility than Firebase, and I have very good reasons for that. So Amplify framework is an open source framework that simply provides you a command line interface, libraries to integrate front-end code with the backend and the user interface components to build a full stack application. And it can be either on web, it can be on Android, it can be on iOS, it can even be on React Native or some other framework like Flutter and all. So you can use Amplify universally in any sort of a platform on any sort of a framework. And that makes Amplify quite extensible. With Amplify, we also get access to the Amplify console that simply provides a Git-based workflow through which you can host your full stack serverless web application with continuous deployment. So if you're already familiar with Git, then you can have your app hosted on GitHub. And using your GitHub repository, you can host your application on Amplify. And with every commit, the Amplify will run a CI/CD pipeline. It will continuously integrate your entire build and it will deploy that on the server. And you don't have to manage any sort of a server for that. This whole operation is completely serverless. And this is why Amplify is so interesting. So for people who are entirely new to Amazon Web Services, then you can just identify it as a cloud service from Amazon that provides services in form of building blocks. And these building blocks can be used to create and deploy any type of application on the cloud. So these services or building blocks are designed to work with each other. And as a result, these applications are quite sophisticated. They are highly scalable because they have the backing of these tools and services provided by the AWS. And AWS is a giant cloud computing platform that provides its customer with a wide array of services. If you want something for machine learning, AWS has got that. If you want something for CI/CD pipelines, AWS has got the same. If you want just to deploy your static website, AWS has got a service for that as well. So AWS provides a lot of services that can be exactly used to solve a lot of business problems in and around your product. And we can simply define AWS as a secure cloud service platform that offers compute power, database storage, content delivery, and various other functionality. So to be more specific, it is just a large bundle of cloud-based services. And AWS provides a lot of services that can simplify our development for better. And here are a few of them. We have first got Amazon S3. and it basically stands for Simple Storage Service. And to be very precise, it is a basic cloud object storage platform. And S3 doesn't behave like a file system. It is just an object store. That basically means that it will treat each file as an object, unlike the traditional storage. And it does not have to talk the language of the block or the sector. You can just run static sites with ease from S3 itself without having any sort of a server. Then we have got DynamoDB, which is a managed database provided by AWS. It supports both key value entries and documents. And this simply means that a field can contain a single value, such as a string or a number, but it can also contain a document. That is simply, it is a JSON based object. It is also schemaless. So beside a key, it doesn't rely on a predefined schema. You can think of it as a combination of both relational and document based database like MongoDB. We then have got AppSync, which enables you to create a managed GraphQL layer to securely access, write, and combine data from one or more data sources. So you can link a DynamoDB table as a data source directly without having to write custom resolvers. And finally, we have got AWS AppSync, which is again fully managed. So you don't need a server running on your GraphQL API. You can additionally configure authentication based upon API token or OAuth 2. And lastly, we have got Lambda, which is my personal favorite. And it simply enables you to write the entire backend using individual functions that can run on the cloud. And this is an extremely powerful feature for managing and provisioning servers for your backend in an entirely serverless way. And you guessed it right. Amplify combines all of them into a single unit. So with Amplify, you can configure and interact with the underlying cloud services like AWS AppSync that will allow you to manage your GraphQL APIs, with Amazon Cognito that will give you the authentication and the authorization modules. You can have Amazon Pinpoint that will give you the analytics and the customer engagement features. You can have AWS Lambda that will give you the business logic and the GraphQL resolver. You can have Amazon S3 for the storage. You can have Lex for the conversation-based AI, artificial intelligence. And all of this can be directly managed from a single command line interface. And thus it minimizes the time required to set up and manage your entire backend service. And that saves time, right? Amplify CLI, basically the command line interface, will allow you to create, integrate, and manage the AWS cloud services for your application. You can include component libraries to call API gateways. You can simply add authentication. And all of these main features are supported by Amplify CLI. And this can include around data modeling, deployment in multiple environments and infrastructure, all from your terminal itself. So you don't have to manage your infrastructure. Amplify will simply take care of all these things. And thus it becomes one ring to rule them all. So now we have reached the final agenda of the session. And this is where we will be building an application using both React and Amplify. So now that we have understood things up to this point, let's get started with building our application. So we are going to use a traditional create React app template to set up our React application in a few minutes, and then configure the Amplify using our AWS console for the purpose. And all of this would be completely hands-on. So it would be better for you to pull out your favorite code editor and the terminal and get started with coding out the application. So if you have got any doubts up till this point, you can put it on the chat section and I will address them right now before we jump into the coding part. So it can be anything that you have in mind right now or anything that was not made clear by me, so that while coding, we have got all the concepts up and clear. Okay, I guess we don't have any further doubts. Okay, no issues. Let's jump into see what we are going to do. So this is what we are going to need today. So you need to have at least Node.js and npm installed on your system. If you have not already installed them, then head over to Node.js official website and download the latest stable release. npm, basically, which stands for the Node Package Manager, is shipped with Node.js itself, so you don't need to have them installed separately. Once you do that, you can install the Create React App module, which would allow you to set up your React application in an easy way. If you have done that before, if you have not done that before, I will just show you how to do that. And lastly, you need to have an account on Amazon Web Services with access to the console and a GitHub account as well. So you need to enter your credit card details for the former, but not for the later. So get these things up and ready before we actually start. Yes, Keshav. So we require an AWS account for Amplify. So if in case you don't have an AWS account pre-configured, then you can always see the session at a later time. You can have an AWS account, you need to enter your credit card details, and then you can simply follow the entire instruction that I will be showing you right now. Okay, so some examples of serverless app. So basically there are a lot of examples, and it would be impossible for me to nitpick because many of the startups right now are making use of serverless based technology stack. If I have to remember one example, then basically the Slack bots are, I guess, serverless. I don't remember them correctly, so if possible, I will get back to you on this question at a later time. But serverless solutions are provided by a lot of cloud providers, even by Google Cloud Platform, by Azure, and by AWS. So many of the startups and even some enterprise businesses are using serverless for their day-to-day tasks. Okay, Yash has another question on what are the shortcomings of serverless. So one of the premier shortcomings of serverless is you cannot actually test the serverless functions with that efficiency. So this is one problem that I have faced a lot of time, because while developing and deploying your application, you need to have a test pipeline up and running. But with a serverless in place, it sometimes gets difficult to test your functions. And that exactly makes the thing difficult and a lot more messy. Then there are some sort of problems with the third-party APIs because you need to set up the authentication for them. And there are some specific problems in that as well. And as you add the functions in your serverless application, there would be a lot of friction that you have to take care about. So that will be exactly problematic if you're developing an enterprise application right from the scratch. So you need to take care of all these things before you jump into the serverless, and you need to have a very robust architecture for the purpose. Okay, so I guess that answers the question. Yes, so let us see what we are going to build. Okay, so this is what we are going to build today. You need to we will basically build a very simple authentication application using React and Amplify. So if you have tried to develop an authentication application, and basically you can identify it as a simple application that has a login page, it has a sign up page, it has a forget password and an OTP based authentication, then you would have realized that making such an application right from the scratch is very, very difficult, because you have to take care a lot about the database operations and all those other things. So in this case, we will have everything set up in less than 15 lines of code. So in less than 15 lines of code, you will have an authentication module up and running that will have all these features that I have mentioned a few seconds back. And we will be deploying it on the AWS cloud without any sort of a problem. So we will have a very simple sign up page that will ask us for some basic information like name, mail address, password, and more. And we will have a very simple login page as well. We will also implement an OTP based authentication along with a forget password option. So this definitely sounds interesting. So let's start doing it. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen for a second and start sharing my screen for the purpose of my terminal. Till then, if anyone has got any doubts, they can just ask it right now, or else we are just gonna jump into the main code. I guess my entire screen would be visible right now. Yes, I guess it's visible. Can anyone just confirm if they can see my terminal? I guess you guys can see it. Okay, so first things first. So basically, I have already pre-installed some of the packages that I need for this entire tutorial because I cannot afford to install all these node modules back again because this will simply cost me a lot of internet and a lot of time as well. And we will not be able to wind up with this session in the expected time that we are looking for. So I guess you already have installed the Node.js and the npm. If you have installed it for the first time, then make sure to run these commands to exactly see that the node has been installed and the npm has also been installed. Okay, so I guess both of them are installed properly. So we don't have to worry about a lot of things. So if this is the first time you are making any sort of a React application, then this is the command that actually allows us to set up a create React app template. So this is a module that we will be installing globally. I will not be doing it right now because React takes a lot of space to install and a lot of time as well. So let us just skip this part because I have already installed it. But if this is the first time for you, make sure to run this command. And it basically tells your node package manager to install this specific package, basically the create React app globally. So basically you can make use of this module anywhere on your local machine. So let me just skip this step right now because I don't want to install it. And if you're installing it on a very good internet connection, it will still take you around 10 to 15 minutes to install it right from the scratch. And once you have installed it, then simply run this command, which basically create React app, and then you can name whatever your application is. So in my case, it is Code Warrior session. It can be anything for you. It can be my app, it can be my first React app, or it can be my first web app, something like that. So once you click on the enter, it will start installing all the packages that you need to have for setting up your React application. It will include all the transpilers that will convert your ES6 code into the normal JavaScript code. It will provide you with scripts that will allow you to initialize your development server and will also allow you to build your entire application right from the scratch and also deploy it somewhere. So with this create React app package, you will have everything pre-installed and pre-configured. You don't have to do any sort of a manual install after this. So once you do that, we can kickstart our React application by simply pushing up this command. And this is npm start. The main reason for this is, let me just start my VS Code for this purpose so that I can show you why exactly we are doing this. If my VS Code crashes in between, I'm sorry about that because it takes a lot of space up. Okay. So once we set up the React app, this is what we are going to see right here. So if I just open the package.json, let me just do that. Yeah. So package.json will contain all the dependencies and all the scripts. So I have already installed some of the dependencies right here. I will show you how to do that back again. And this is the script that we have. So we have a script for starting, building, testing, and ejecting. So right now we will be starting up our application so that we can test it on a development server. So let's push in the command npm start, and that will basically tell our node package manager to start this application. Let us do that. It will take a couple of seconds to kickstart the application. So up till this point, if anyone has got any doubts, they can put it on the chat section. Okay. Guys, please be patient. React literally takes a lot of time to kickstart a development server on my local machine. I don't know about others. Okay, so till the point this application actually starts, why don't I simply have another tab up and ready? So in that tab, I can basically show you what we are going to do. Hmm, okay, we are here. Okay, so since our React application is initializing and it will be setting up a development server, let us go over how we can actually set up AWS Amplify. So before setting up AWS Amplify, you need to have an AWS account up and ready. So if you have not done that, you can just set it up real easy. If you have your credit card, it will take you literally 5 minutes to set up your entire AWS account. It will not be charging you anything except for 1 rupee, which I think you can afford. And it is just for authenticating that yes, your credit card actually exists or not. So please guys do that. And if you have not done that before, you can just follow up here to see what I'm doing right now. So let us first install AWS Amplify on our local machine. So for this, we will be pushing a command, which will be npm install -g, which is basically the global tag. And we will pass AWS Amplify -CLI. So if you cannot see this, then it is the thing. So we are installing the AWS Amplify CLI, and using this CLI, we will be provided with a single tool chain that will allow us to develop and deploy applications using AWS Amplify. So since I have already done that before and I showed you in the package.json, I will not be doing it right again because this will waste a lot of space for me. So let me just erase everything up. And after the Amplify CLI is installed, it will take you a few minutes to do that. You will have a singular command line interface tool through which you can manage and configure your AWS resources according to your demand. And once you do that, we have to set up our AWS IAM user, and that basically stands for the Identity Access Management user on your local machine. And to do that, we have to push in a command that is amplify configure. So once we push in this command, it will immediately ask me for my AWS credentials that I need to make use of for my purpose. So let us wait for a few seconds. Hmm, my React app is still starting. Okay, guys, I guess this is taking a lot of time. Okay, in the meantime, our React application has kickstarted. Okay, let me kickstart it back again. Okay, I guess it is not starting in a way I would have expected to. Let me try configuring the AWS amplifier from my command line itself. Okay, so at least our React application has kickstarted. So hmm, it has simply gone. Okay, so at least we have our React application up and ready. So this is the create React application template, and it basically sets up the essential things that we need to have in our React application. So if I just go to the code, then we have got our package.json that will basically tell us about the name of the application, the version, the dependencies, basically the node modules that we need to have installed for our application. Then we have got the src, where we have all our files that basically concern the application at large. So it can be app.js, which is the standard Java JSX component that is being rendered on the web browser right now. So if we just remove this whole thing up and replace it with just one single hello world, so let's do that. Let us remove this whole thing up and let us try to have an h1 tag, and that will basically say me hello world. If I just save this, then the entire React application will compile back again. It is compiling with some warnings, but if I just go, then I can see that we have our hello world right here. So I can just remove this warning by removing this logo because we essentially don't need it. Now our application will be compiling without any sort of an error. So I guess Amplify configure is taking a hell lot of time. It's not something that I would have expected. So let me just jump to what actually Amplify configure is doing. So if this is the first time you're installing Amplify, then if you are running Amplify configure command, it will basically allow you to specify the AWS region and the IAM username. So basically IAM stands for an identity access management, and the user will be basically the standalone user that will allow you to interact with the AWS resources that you are simply making use of. So it will have a username, it will have an access key ID, it will have a few more parameters that you need to take care of while setting up the local IAM user. And this is what you're going to make use of if you are developing and deploying your Amplify application. As you can see, the Amplify is completely stuck and I cannot do anything about it right now. So what I will be doing here is I will just get started with initializing my Amplify application. So if you want to get started with Amplify, once you have already configured the Amplify CLI, then you need the Amplify UI components as well. And this can be done by simply running the command npm install AWS Amplify, AWS Amplify, and UI React. So basically, what this command will do is that it will install the UI components that are supposed to be for React from the AWS Amplify CLI so that we can just import them in our application and we can start using them. Since I have already installed that in my package.json, let me show that. Oh yes, Amplify is here. Okay, I can at least show it right now. So this is what Amplify configure actually looks like. So first, what it will be doing is that it will ask us to log into our AWS management console. And this is the singular place where I can manage everything about my AWS. Once I do that, let us press enter. And then we need to specify the AWS region. So it can be US East 1, it can be AP Southeast 1, it can be CA. So just for the sake of this session, I'm just going with US East 1. And then you can specify a username. So the username can be anything. It can be Harsh, it can be Code Warriors, or it can be freaking React developer, something like this. So let me just make it Harsh underscore React. And once that happens, it will again open my management console. And this is where it will ask me to set up my username and my password for this purpose. So since I have already set up my IAM username and I'm not so comfortable in exposing my personal details, I will not be doing that. But if I just go over here, I can see all the users that I have granted access to through my AWS dashboard. Okay, so these are all my users that I have given the access to, and this is what I am going to make use of today as well. If you have not already done that, you can just go over here. You can add the user. You can specify the same username that you have specified here. You can give them some access key ID and some of the other things that you need to give. Let me just show that. So you need to have a Hertz React. You can give them a programmatic access, and that will enable an access key ID and a secret access key that you need to enter right here so that the local Amplify CLI can authenticate that yes, you are a user on AWS console. And then you can set up the permissions. So you can add the user either to a group or else you can just create a new group and you can add them there. I will just add them to my personal. And then you can create some tags. So basically, these will be some key value pairs, and the values are entirely optional. And once we do that, let me just do that. And then we are going to review the entire thing. So once we have done that, we will get the access to our access key ID and all the other things. So I will not be doing that. I will not be showing that right now because it will surely go out of the context and it will surely expose some confidential information. So this is what you need to know to just set up the IAM user. Once you have successfully set up the IAM user, you can exactly see that on your Amplify console. So let me just close this right now because we don't need it. And yes, let me just go back to my code right here and let me type in Amplify in it. So make sure to have at least the UI React component installed because this is what we are going to use today for developing our application. Yes. Okay. So Amplify Init, just as the name suggests, it will basically allow you to initialize your entire application using Amplify. So basically in this, there will be a lot of questions asked to you related to what is the name of the project, what is the environment, what is the default editor, what is the JavaScript framework that you're making use of. And once you have done that, Amplify will basically create a backend for you without writing any sort of a code that will be pushed to the Amplify console that will be on AWS. So let us just wait for this to finish. Okay, I guess my just about this. Let me just continue here. Okay, so first we have to enter a name for the project. In our case, it is going to be Code Warriors. Let me just make it Code Warriors. Okay, Code Warriors. Code Warrior, yeah. So then enter a name for the environment. Since we are in the development stage right now, so let us keep it as dev. Then we have to choose our default editor. Since we are using Visual Studio Code, let us use that. And as you can see, the Amplify is now configured here with all our logs and audits. And now we have to choose what type of app we are building. Since we are building a JavaScript based application, we are going to use JavaScript. And then what sort of a JavaScript framework are we using? So since we are using React, let us choose React. Let us choose our source directory path, src in our case. Let us choose the distribution directory, that is our build folder. Build command, start command, and it will kickstart my application. So for majority of the questions, you can just press enter as the answer because the options are already pre-filled for you. So you don't have to worry about it a lot. But in the second question, you have to actually specify whether you are on the development stage or the testing stage, because that will actually matter a lot depending upon the project stage that you're on right now. So let us wait for a few more seconds before it actually uh, asks us some few more questions. Till then, if anyone has got any doubts, they can just put it on the chat section right now. So now that we have reached up to this point, it will basically ask if we want to use an AWS profile or not. Since we want to make use of that, let's press Y. And then it will ask me what sort of a profile I would like to use. So I will just go with the Hirsch AWS one. And it will start adding my backend environment development to my AWS Amplify console app. And it will start initializing my project in the cloud. So it will take again a couple of seconds. It will manage everything for me, my database, my APIs, my authentication modules and everything. And it will push my entire backend on the Amplify console. So I don't have to worry about it a lot. So it will create the deployments all across the regions that I have already specified. Yes, so we have finished up adding our entire thing. So our Amplify backend has been configured. And once it has been like initialized and set up properly, we can have something like an Amplify add-on. So Amplify add-on will basically add Cognito. So Cognito is an AWS service that allows us to add authentication modules to our application. So this will simply add the authentication module in our application without having to hard code anything. Since it is taking a lot of time, let us get started with writing our code for our purpose as well, because our UI templates has already been pre-configured, and we just need to add the authentication module and deploy our application on Amplify console before we actually have to set up our CI/CD pipelines. Okay. Okay, since it is taking a lot of time, let us jump into start writing the code for our purpose. So we need to concern ourselves with only two files here. Okay, first let us configure our authentication module. So the configured provider is Amazon Cognito, and we want to go with default configuration. So let us go with the default one. And it will basically asks us how do you want the users to be able to sign in. So some of the applications want users to make use of email. Some of them wants to make use of username, like Reddit is one popular example of that. So let us go with the username right now. And do you want to configure advanced settings? No, I don't want to do that. So let me click on that as well. And once we have done all these processes, Amplify will complete my authentication module for me, and then we can simply deploy the application now. Okay, let it finish. Okay, till the time it gets over, let me just jump onto the React application part here. So basically, we need to concern ourselves with only two files up here. The one is the app.js and the one is the index.js, uh, because this is where we are going to import our UI templates and we are going to make use of our application. So let us first start working on the index.js right here. So index.js has got a React DOM render. This is where our application is actually being rendered in the build form. So let us have our Amplify imports so that we can start working on them. So the first thing that we will be doing is that we are going to import the config, and those will be from the AWS exports. Yes. Then let us import the Amplify, and they will be from the AWS Amplify module that we have already installed before. And once we have done that, let us do just one final thing, and that is amplify.configure, which will basically configure my Amplify credentials. Once we do that, let us move next. And we don't have anything to do right here. Everything seems fine. So let us save this. This will update our Amplify credentials for our React application. In the meantime, our authentication module has been set up. So let us push this entire backend to our Amplify console. So we are just going to do one final command, and that is amplify push. Uh, Amplify push, yes. And it will take a hell lot of time. So in the meantime, let us get started with working on our app.js. So in the app.js, we have already deleted our previous boilerplate code. So we are just going to delete it back again. And now we need some specific modules up and ready for our purpose. So now we need some specific modules up and ready for our purpose. So let us get started with first importing with authenticator. Here my system hanged for a second, but it's working now. And can't resolve AWS exports in it. This seems to be an issue. Here my system hanged for a second, but it's working now. And okay, let's go back to our this module seems to have been working, but it's not. Exports. Now this is a serious issue. Let me just try debugging this error. Just give me a second. Let me start sharing my screen now. I guess it should work. I have kickstarted my React application back again, so it should be up and ready. So up till this point, if anyone has got any questions, they can just put it on the live chat because things are not going in a way that were expected to go. So in the meantime, once the application is being set up, let us go to our AWS Amplify console and take a look at the backend that we have already set up. So this is our Amplify console, and this is where we can control all the applications that we are developing and deploying through the Amplify CLI. And this one is the application that we have recently created. So we have already deployed it. It is available on our Amplify console. And this was what I had deployed a few hours back just for the purpose of the demonstration. And if you are gonna take a look at the application, this is how the application looks like. Since React is getting unresponsive at this time, let me jump to the main thing. So you can even try out this application on your own local machine. And this is the entire UI component that we have imported. You can specify your username, your password. And if you have not created an account, you can create an account right here. Or possibly if you have forgotten your password, you can reset your password. And all of this is pre-configured for you through the purpose of the AWS Management Console. So let me create an account. It can be password. Okay, let me give a password for this. Let me give my mail address. Let me give my phone number. Once I do that, create account, it will send me a confirmation sign up. And this is where I need to go to my Gmail to find out the confirmation code, basically the OTP based authentication that I was looking for. Let me open my Gmail for the purpose. Yes. So this is our verification code 932931. Let me just use this. And this will confirm my sign up. So now you have been signed up into your Amplify application. You don't have multiple things there. We just have the auth app that is we defined in the app.js. And you can simply get started with adding more components to your application through this way. So Amplify provides a real nice interface for you to add multiple components in your application. So you can have some sort of a machine learning service or an artificial intelligence chatbot using Lex, and you can simply enhance the user interface of your application and also the user experience while keeping the code logic as minimal as possible for you. And server Amplify is exactly serverless, so you will not be paid for it quite a lot. You will only be paid for the requests that are being made to your serverless application. So as you can see, the backend environment is up and ready. The front-end environment, on the other hand, is connected to a GitHub repository. So all the files that are present on this editor, like you can just push them to a GitHub repository. You can set up a CI/CD pipeline, and every time you make a commit on that GitHub repository, the whole CI/CD pipeline will be kickstarted back again, and you can simply deploy your application using that. So you don't have to worry a lot about having to deploy your application multiple times in a day if you are adding more features or fixing some bugs in that. So this is everything for the day. I possibly could not show you how to deploy the application via CI/CD pipeline, because the whole process is exactly taking much longer time than I was expecting. So up till this point, if anyone has got any doubts, they can just ask it right now. And I will just pass this Amplify to the StreamYard so that you can even try it out. Okay, so with this, we come to the end of this session. So if anyone has got any doubts or questions, they can ask it right now.
So, as there is no doubt, so thank you very much, sir, for this session. And guys, we have some moderators. They will share the link of the quiz that has to be attended for certificate, and a feedback form will be given in the chat box. So please share your feedback about this session so we can pass it with the speaker as well. So thank you.